Oh, that's too bad. Oh, ick. First date.
Yeah.
So you've had her.
We've had her for about 2 weeks now.
That's bad. Oh, ick. First date.
There it is. I'm not sure. Okay. Let's go ahead and see if that works. Yeah. Gotta not touch it and
Don't
pray.
breathe.
Pray it doesn't move. Okay. All right. Let's start off with singing our song. You guys see the word? Father bless us. Guide us and strength. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. All right. Well, let us cover something that to me became something very, very important. We covered a lot of the information that I wanted to share with you guys when it comes to doing Bible studies and, you know, the standard of Bible study, the idea, the concept, the philosophy of doing a Bible study, you know, how to give a Bible study to someone, when to give them, when not to give them. And so we talked about those skills, we talked about those dynamics. And now we're going to talk about and have a discussion. I'm hoping that's what we're recording it, because I'm not only going to share with you guys, but I'm going to encourage the church to watch this video on the website so that they can figure out exactly how it is that we're going to work together in 2024. And I'll start off by saying this. I worked in the Taft Seventh-day Adventist Church. And at that time, I had been in ministry for about 15 years. And so I had never had an experience where a conference gave me one church to work with. And so the way that came around is because when we entered the Central California Conference, we came in as the 5 brothers. And then they gave me a license of paper. And so they gave me the paper license that basically says, okay, you can pastor in this particular district. But they didn't give me an actual card. Now I have a card. I have an ordained minister's card. But back in those days, they gave me a little piece of paper that said I can go ahead and function as a pastor in this capacity. So what ended up happening is when they switched me from the Shafter Seventh Adventist Church and the Corking Seventh Adventist Church and moved me up to Taft, in order to do that, they had to give me an actual plastic license, a non-ordained plastic minister's license. And that was my first church that I ever had an opportunity to pastor 100% at the time. That was awesome. Having a church that I spent there every single Sabbath, every single week was a delight for me because I never had that experience up to that time. 15 years as a Seventh-day Adventist, 15 years working in ministry, and only one time in all these years, I have only had one church. So me and Hannah did absolutely everything. We started a youth group. We started a whole bunch of activities in the community. We started working with the community leaders. I started working with the ministerial association there in the town of Shafter Taft. And so we started working really close with the ministerial association, so much so that even to today, they still ask how I'm doing. That's how close we became working together. And so through the years, as we started working there, I started to realize that we took a church, by God's grace, we took a church that was doing absolutely nothing in the community, nothing for their neighbors, nothing for their friends, to a church that was constantly inviting their neighbors and friends to the church, and everything was fantastic. And then I felt the call by God to go finish my graduate studies. And so I finished my undergrad, and I felt the call by God to go finish my master's. And so the conference made that arrangement, and we flew out to, actually drove out to Andrews University to spend about 2.5 years there at Andrews University to finish a master's degree in divinity. While I was there, I heard the most discouraging news. Everything that Hannah and I had started, all the programs, all the activities, all the movement, everything that we have worked so hard to develop in the years that we were there, died. Nothing was being conducted. Nothing was being done in the community. No representative attended the ministerial association. There was no type of contact. There was no type of everything. In other words, what ended up happening while we were there, the church was able to grow. The church was able to become active. The church was able to do et cetera, et cetera. But when we left, I got the discouraging news that, oh, Pastor, when you left, everything that you did is now no one's doing it. No one fills your shoes. And so that was heartbreaking for me, because the first time I had a church by myself with no other church, because at that time we were pastoring 2 churches before we got there, and at one time we had 4 churches. So multiple church districts were very used to our ministry. And so to hear that news was absolutely devastating for me. And I vowed never to work that way again. Here's what I learned. I learned through that experience that I did everything. I learned through that experience that it was my energy, my enthusiasm, my passion for winning people to Christ that spurred the church to do something. I never injected that passion and that energy to my members. Didn't really know how. I thought that the way you do it is by doing stuff. So if we go do evangelism, we go knocking on doors, we go, feed the homeless, whatever we did as the community, as a church, to the community outside the church, I thought that was the way that you inject this energy and this passion. But I came to the reality that that's not it. I can take you to give Bible studies. I can take you to hospital visitations, but the passion is not going to be injected in you until it becomes yours. That's when I began to realize that I utterly failed. 15 years, I failed to make evangelism for the member. And so the way I was taught, the way I was trained, the way I was equipped to do what I currently do, they never really shared with me how to make evangelism for the people, except to do these trainings,
to bring people in here, to do an evangelistic meeting, to invite the members to come, to invite the members' friends to come, and so forth and so on. And so by the end of the evangelistic campaign, the friends usually sometimes get baptized and everyone's fantastic. And then those people that got baptized are no longer in the church and we're hunting them down. And we go through this cycle. And members get discouraged and they figure out that evangelism doesn't work. It's just not effective. It's not doing exactly what you promised. It's not doing exactly what you're training. And so what's the point of doing that? And so people got discouraged. People just said, well, let's just come to church and let's go home after church and let's call it good. And that has been the custom of Adventism for all my ministry. And so through the years, I began to ask myself the question, how can I change? How can I affect change? How can I be a benefit to the churches in which I serve? Because if I'm not doing that, why am I doing what I'm doing? I'm wasting my time, I'm wasting your time, everyone's wasting each other's time, and it's not worth it. So I began to realize with these three errors and these three mistakes that I realized in South California that I learned, I went through the seminary, I got the training that they have, the church growth classes, the preaching classes, the exegetical classes, the Hebrew classes, the Greek classes, and I came out of there realizing, because there was one class that was an evangelism class, that I had to provide a plan. And I had to develop a plan of what I would do if I go to a church. Now, this is with the assumption that I've never pastored a church before. I have no experience. And based upon the information that I got from the class and the professor, I would use that information to develop a plan, develop a strategy in order for me to go to my church or go to my board and to move forward. And so most of the students were pretty much like first-year students, never pastored before. And so they had audacious ideas. I would go to the church and change the carpet. I would go to the church and move the piano from one side of the pew, or one side of the platform to the other side of the platform. I would go to the church and build the pew. I would go to the church and blah, blah, blah. And then I wrote this idea. And I have been using this idea since 2015. We're now in 2023. And I'm still in the process of experimentation and wonder if it's actually effective. So here's what I realized. I shared with you guys at the last training class, and I don't expect you guys to remember, but I shared with you guys the concept of the mentoring model that I developed years ago, as I started realizing the need that I needed to have in order to mentor and effectively equip my leaders. How can I effectively equip my leaders? And I developed this model based upon Sister White's writings that have to do with the human body, the human spirituality. She talks about the mental aspect of the soul. She talks about the emotional components of the soul. She talks about the spiritual reality of the soul, and she talks about the physical component of the human soul. Another one brings up the idea that when an individual Christian works on all of these aspects, they become a whole Christian. They become an effective Christian. They become someone that is that is delicious for the people that surround them. You know, it's interesting because I didn't realize how powerful this was until I started practicing it and living it. There was someone in church today that you probably did not know. He sat in the front row, he was bald, and then his fiancée girlfriend was right beside him, and they had two girls, about my children's age, about 3 rows back from the front on this side where you're sitting. And so if we're sitting here, so it would be the right side of the sanctuary. And so this is the challenge with bigger churches. When you have so many people, you miss these individuals that have never been there before. And so I don't know how many people saw them. I don't know how many people greeted them. I don't know how many people said hi to them. But he is my coach, my jiu-jitsu coach from Chula, Washington. He came down here just to surprise me. And so he was there on Friday morning when I was training, and I was there stretching for class, and then he just popped in. And I had no idea he was going to be there, but he came all the way down here just to see me. And so this is someone that I shared with you stories. He came to me. I never shared, Christ at the gym. I never talked about Bible studies at the gym. I never purposely proselytized at the gym. I was just being Howard. I was just being me. And then one day he asked me if it was okay for him to come to church. Never been to church before in his entire life. He told me he wanted to come to church, he wanted to sit in the very back pew and be a fly on the wall and just observe how Christianity plays out. He had no idea how it played out. Came to church that Sabbath morning. He was warmly greeted by everyone. Which is a smaller church. True, the church is a smaller church. And so people that come into the church stick out like a sore thumb, especially visitors, because they're not all wearing long skirts and they're not really ultra conservative. So he comes in the church and he sits right near the second row to the front. That's where he decided to sit. And he loved the experience. Soon after that, as we started to share, he started to share with me some personal items and some ideas and some concepts. He asked me if it was okay for him to be baptized. I never approached the subject. I never shared with him Bible studies about it. It was just his hunger and his thirst in order for him to understand more of what he was seeing in me. And that's what I began to realize. Because when people start working, when individuals start working on all these aspects of their life, they become a whole Christian and they become delicious, attractive to other people. So today he shares with me that he would like for me to have the privilege to marry him and his fiance. And she's not his fiance yet. And so, but he's going to ask her to marry him because they've been together for a while now. And she's been a really positive influence to him and an inspiration to me. And for me to have the privilege to marry them is huge, because this is someone that never went to church, never attended church, never had a spiritual contact, but now is desiring a spiritual individual to do a spiritual ceremony for marriage. That to me is awesome. Does that make sense? And that comes from developing skills. So I realized that if we were to spend 25% of our time in these areas, we would be able to create 100%, at least 100% of effort with the help of God to create a balanced, well-functioning Christian to be able to influence people. So there are different things that I teach when it comes to mental, there's different things that I teach when it comes to emotional, there's different things that I teach when it comes to spiritual and physical that I share with people in order to develop and focus on those areas. But that's not our discussion for today. So what I shared with my professor at Andrews University as a strategy and plan that I've been developing since 2015 follow. I realized that these same four components are the same felt needs of our society. Now, they don't have all four of them. They might have all four of them. Some of them have more of an emphasis on mental and less of an emphasis on spiritual, but it's still there. And so one of them is really heavy, and the other one is not so heavy. But I began to realize that my community has a really mental health crisis. We know that to be the case even now. My community has a major emotional component. They don't know what to do with their emotions, their anger, their frustrations, their marriage, their children, their drugs, their alcohol, whatever the case may be. There's definitely a spiritual lack in our society because we can see it as we just go to the store. And there's definitely a physical reality that people just don't know how to live healthy. They don't know that it's a simple walk down the street or just simple exercise would make a drastic difference in many people's lives. And so what I realized is that if I were to focus on these four components, knowing that my community, the people that surround this church, have that same reality that I mentor my leaders with, what would happen if a church for 1 year were to focus on all of these components? Does that make sense? So here's what I developed. I realized that there are 12 months in a year. We have January, we have February, we have March. Then we have April, we have May, and we have June. Then we have July, then we have August, and then we have September. Then we have October, November, and then December. And as I map these out, I realized that there are exactly 3 months or a trimester. Is that what it's called? A quarter. There's a quarterly breakup of the entire year. And so 3 months here, 3 months here, 3 months here, 3 months here. And so then I realized what would happen if we were to take one of these four components and focus for 3 months in these particular components. So let's say, for example, in these 3 months, we would focus on the mental health of our community. In these 3 months, we would focus on the emotional health of our community. In these 3 months, we would focus on the spiritual nurture of the community. And on the last 3 months, we would focus on the physical realities of the community. And so as I started to develop this and I started to see, here's what I began to realize. Members get burned out very quickly because we're not used to working all the time. As a Bible worker, getting paid to work, my job and my responsibility was to work all the time. I would put in the 40 hours, the 50 hours, the 60 hours, and the conference will reimburse me for that reality. But a typical member has a job, they have a responsibility, they take care of parents, they take care of whatever the case may be. So for them to dedicate 40 hours of ministry is just unfathomable. When it comes to Sabbath, you know, on Sabbath afternoon, it was not unusual for me to go home after church and to change my clothes and to go to Bible studies for the rest of the afternoon into the night. Well, I can't expect members to do that because they work all week. And because they work all week or they have challenges throughout the week, the only day they get to relax and just kind of recuperate their energies or emotions, whatever the case may be, is on Saturday. And so here I am asking them to join me into these endeavors, into this activity, and I was running into walls. And the reason why is because they're just not, the energy level's not there. So then I began to realize, what if instead of making it a constant work, a constant workload for members to effectively do ministry for the church, what if they were to do 3 months segments? In other words, what if we were to develop with these 4 components of the community, the reality that they're all dealing with, what if we were to develop teams that would be able to minister these particular aspects of the community for just 3 months? That's it. They would just work for 3 months and then they would rest and they would assist the other teams. So what if the members would develop a team of members to work for 3 months with the mental, a team of members to work with the emotional, a team of members spiritual and physical? What would happen? What would that actually look like? Here's what I began to learn. I began to learn that this is very effective. And the reason why it's very effective is because multiple people that have a passion and have a desire to work for the mental health of individuals would gather together and they would work together, and they themselves would inspire the other church members to be involved. Does that make sense? So this group, this nucleus of 5 people, because I always kept the team to about 5, no more than 8 individuals. And so these 5 or 8 individuals would get together, they would plan, but then they would go ahead and grab a whole bunch of members that aren't doing anything in the church and ask them, would you be interested in a mental health component for the community? You know, and we would find doctors, and we would find psychologists, and we would find individuals that really loved mental health and really saw the need for mental health. And these individuals started working together. When this group finished, it led to the emotional component. And the other team kicked in. And the other team says, okay, we're going to plan this and we're going to organize this. For the next 3 months, we're going to work on these things. And while the mental team was resting, the emotional team is engaged, and the emotional team grabs other members who weren't involved, who have a passion for emotion, for emotional aspect. They did marriage seminars and stress seminars and things of that nature to lower the emotions, because you realize I was shocked as to how many people have no clue how to effectively do marriage, or how to effectively parent, or how to lower their stress, or how to deal with their emotions, their anger, their frustration, or whatever the case may be. And so we found this to be very, very, very effective. Then we did the spiritual. We would do the evangelistic campaign, we do prayer, we do some type of spiritual emphasis for these people. And then we would do a physical. This is just an example of what we would do. We would play around with these ideas, we play around with these components, and we switch them around. And what we found is they each attach themselves to the other. So the physical attaches itself to the mental, attaches itself to the spiritual, attaches itself to the emotional. And so whichever one, and you can see, this is the reason why I drew this diagram, is because these circles interlock with each other. What affects your spiritual will affect your mental, will affect your physical, will affect your emotional. Once we began to realize, I began to see that there's a flow that becomes very effective for the church to follow, a plan, a strategy, if you will, for the church to follow. So we tried this for the very first time in South California. I divided the church into groups. I divided them into an emphasis on the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. We focused on a lot of events. We focused on a lot of things. And what I saw is an excitement and a joy. We didn't do this in Tampa. We did this in Modesto, in Los Banos. But we saw a joy that was absolutely powerful. I remember we did we were working on, I think it was the mental health. One of the members found a friend of hers that was elderly and was unable to fix their yard, to clean up their yard and do all their stuff. And it was affecting her health, it was affecting her joy, because she didn't have the physical capability of doing so, to clean up her yard. So she organized an event for the entire church to go there and to clean up her yard. That's all we did. We didn't give her a Bible study. We didn't give this lady, any information. We just showed up as a church body, people that had not worked before. We just showed up as a church body and we decided to do something for her. And we spent the entire day cleaning up her yard, landscaping her yard, cutting down trees, removing the brush, removing all this trash, and removing it from her house. We took it to the dump for her. And the thing that she gave for us is she made us an entire meal. We weren't expecting her to feed us. We didn't ask for her to feed us, but she was so grateful and she was so happy of what we had done that it was amazing. We took pictures of the before and after, and just by looking at the before and after, you can sense, I could sense the depression and the sadness lift, because now her backyard looked like a normal backyard rather than right there. It was a moment of the church to work together for the mental health of one person in their community. I realized that people love to serve people. And they want to serve people, but they don't want to do it all the time. Because if they work on mental for an entire 12 months, that just burns them out. But 3-month cycles, everyone is able to do that. Does that make sense? You guys have any questions so far? Yes.
So I've done the physical stuff. I've held cooking classes. I've done all of that. And that's good. It works, but the community's physical needs, emotional needs, mental, spiritual, don't stop if my 3-month slot comes to an end.
Correct.
So, the burnout type of thing, in other words, unless you have a group or something, which I did, and when you keep on going year after year after year after year, that didn't happen. But I'm interested in just hearing how your model occurred. Long term, how long? What was your experience? How long did it go on for? You pick up again a year later, but
yes.
The fact is that the engagement with, say, a group that comes to a cooking class, you don't want to have it stop afterwards either, right? You ultimately have to keep on going with something, which I used to do weekly sessions in my house, in my kind of thing.
So here's what I learned when I was trained in evangelism. We would do programs that would connect to each other. They wouldn't be disconnected. And so everything would be connected to each other, whether you do a premium, whether you do a Bible marketing class, whether you do an evangelism training class, whatever it is that you do, they all connect to each other. This is the idea where the mental, if we were to follow this particular setup, the mental will connect itself to the emotions. So they would finish with the mental, and the people that we brought from the community that we worked with their mental health, we would tell them, hey, listen, we worked the last 3 months of mental health. We have some programs, we have some ideas, we presented to you guys some concepts, and now we're going to focus in April to June on emotion. Because we realized as a church and as a human being that mental is just one aspect of many that we need to work on. So for the next 3 months, we're going to work on these things, and we found that people will come along and they wanted to learn more because they were benefited by the mental components that we share with them. They wanted to hear more about the emotion. Well, we would say the same line to the individuals that we brought through the mental and emotional. Say, listen, you have learned so much about the mental, you have added more information about emotional, so now things are starting to equalize in your life, and you have to realize that all of this is held together by the glue of spirituality. You are a spiritual individual, whether you accept God or don't accept God, or whether you're an atheist or an agnostic. The reality is we are spiritual beings. We have that innate desire for the spiritual, whether it's Satanism or whether it's God, or we have the innate ability to believe in something, to worship something. It is in us. And atheists and agnostics have tried to remove that from individuals, but the harder they try to remove it, the more they reveal that that's a reality in human life. And so I share with people, and we did this, we helped you with the mental, we developed your emotional, now let's develop your spiritual, because they're all interconnected. And as they're interconnected, as you benefit one, you will benefit the other, etc., etc. Well, then we finish up the year with the physical. We showed you guys how to put it all together, pieces together, and that's how we would demonstrate, that's how we would advertise our particular efforts for the entire year. Does that make sense?
Well, it would be cool to observe this pattern that goes on and on and on and on.
Yes.
To watch it roll, because as I think back, you know, I was kind of like a silo, as in, you know, there wasn't something, you know, we had different programs. We had Neil Nedley's depression seminar.
Right.
But you know, that was myself organizing this. And
Right.
so instead of having the whole church geared towards where then there's the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, you know, I can see where that could build and build. But that's kind of like the big picture that needs to be in place.
And what I began to realize is if I make this concept, this strategy, my concept, then it only lasts so long as I am here. But if I am somehow able to inject the reality of this passion being the church's passion, then it will continue long after I'm gone. That was my desire. That's always been my desire. Because I don't have a specialty in mental health or emotional health. I have a specialty in spiritual, maybe physical. But the reality is I find people that are passionate about this reality. And it doesn't take long. It just takes a couple of questions to ask people. What are you passionate about? What are you excited about? Oh man, I cannot stand the way people are doing X, Y, and Z. I would love to be able to do X, Y. Fantastic. Why don't you lead one of these groups? Well, I have no idea what to do. I will teach you. My responsibility is to be your coach. My responsibility as a pastor is to teach you how to effectively lead your group. Let me do that, and then you go out and you do you. And you develop programs, you develop ideas. That one member will inject that with other people, and they will continue from year to year to year to year. My idea has always been, it's kind of like the concept when it comes to my deacons and elders. I believe this, that an elder should never work alone. They should always work with someone who is not an elder. Whether that's a deacon in training or whether that's a deacon that's going to be an elder sometime, and a deacon would do the same thing. They would never work by themselves, or a deaconess, they would never work by themselves. My idea, my concept has always been, if you're an elder, then you take a young man who sees spiritual potential and you start developing from that point on to become an elder in the future. People never say, oh, you know, a young man can't be an elder. Why not? Do you see how young Ellen White was when she started the Seventh-day Adventist church? And all the pioneers of the Seventh-day Adventist movement, and just forget about Adventism. Just think about any earth-shattering movement. It was done by young people. And so why not put a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old together with a seasoned elder and have that elder work with him and develop and develop his skills and so on. Same thing with deacon, deaconess, whatever the case may be. Because eventually, the elder is not going to be able to serve. The deacon is not going to be able to serve. And so right now you would have someone set in motion to take the place of the elder one who retired or decides to resign, or whatever the case may be. So that's the idea for this concept, that someone with a mental passion, emotional passion, they would share that with someone else and they would develop these things. And then through the years, they would just pass it along. Now, how long does this work? I don't know yet. Because we keep being moved. So I haven't been able to really test it, for the long run. That's why I'm really hoping to beat Pastor Lloyd's, 12-year, stay here. I'd love to do 13 years and to really see if this works and to really develop and see what happens. Because my idea has always been, how can we get people involved? Because here's what keeps me in church, involved. If I just come to church and I just sit and I go home and that's it, that does not feed my soul. That does not satisfy me. That does not give me any sense of belonging. That does not give me any sense of accomplishment. But if I come into the church and I'm active doing something, that's what keeps me involved. In fact, I used to tell people this, and I can't say it anymore because when I went to Andrews University, I was not pastor in a church, so I was just a church member. I went to church, I experienced Sabbath school, I experienced church, and then I went home. And then we hung out with some friends, and we had some friends over, and that's basically what Sabbath was when I was in the seminary. But up to that point, for 15 years, I don't know what it's like to be a church member. Because from the moment I entered into the church, I was put to work. I had no idea what work was. I was just put to work. Say, Howard, let's go do a Bible study. Okay, let's go do a Bible study. Hey, Howard, let's go pray. Okay, let's go pray. Hey, Howard, we're going to send you to evangelism school. Fantastic. Let's go to evangelism school. Hey, Howard, we're going to send you. And that's how my ministry has always been from the very beginning. So I began to realize that if I can help other people become involved, then maybe by God's grace, my life has served its purpose. Because I do not want to retire nor die as a Seventh-day Adventist pastor, not having made a significant impact in any church. I want to make a significant impact in church. And my significant impact in a church is not, okay, we painted a wall, or we built a wing for the church, or we changed the praise service, or we did this. No, my idea of making a significant impact in the church is how many people have been involved in evangelism, have been involved in working with their friends and family, and how many of those friends and families are now starting to come to church, are now starting to be benefited, are now excited about our potlucks, about eating the haystacks, about enjoying the things that we enjoy as Seventh-day Adventists. How many of those people are that? Coach coming today. That's exciting. He didn't have to come to church. He drove 3 hours to come to the Milton Adventist Seventh-day Adventist Church. 3 hours. And it's not because of what we have here. He came to see me. He came to spend time with me. So if we can create that reality with all the members of the church, we will never have problems with filling our pews. We would never have problems with how many people we baptize. We would never have problems with all these realities because the church is constantly doing something for its community to benefit its community. These needs are apparent in our community. These realities are there. And I began to realize that if we were to orchestrate, organize it, and see what happens, maybe God can bless in a very, very powerful, significant way. There's a couple of lessons I learned. I learned that the leaders that were in these particular areas were not placed on the right seat of the bus. There is a book that is entitled, I can't think, it's not Atomic Habits. There's another book that I read where the author proposes that leadership is not only putting the right people on your bus, your proverbial leadership bus, but it's putting them in the right seat of the bus. Because if you put a leader in the wrong seat of the bus, even though they're very effective in what they do, and they're very effective leaders, if they're in the wrong seat, they're not going to be able to fulfill their responsibility. They're not going to be able to do what they've been gifted to do because they're in the wrong location. That's another thing that I realized. Someone said to me, well, we're really passionate about mental health. We really didn't have a clue as to how to effectively reach the mental health of an individual. I had to give them the ideas. And even after I gave them the ideas, it didn't become their ideas because they really honestly didn't have a passion for mental health. They had more of a passion for spirituality. So because I put them here, because I just assumed that that's what their passion was, I realized that they were supposed to be here. And if I were just to make that adjustment and make them a spiritual leader, then everything would change. I also realized that people get excited about an idea until they have to do the idea. So we had one experience, one situation where this individual was highly spiritual. When I'm talking about highly spiritual, I'm talking about, you think of the monastic movement of the 2nd and 3rd century, the Christian movement. Really hardcore spiritual. We have to pray more. We have to pray. We have to, pray 3 hours, 4 hours a day. And I said, this person is obviously passionate about spirituality. So I'm going to make them the team leader for the spiritual team. And your responsibility is to take that passion and figure out, what can you guys do in 3 months? And here's what I've learned. What I learned is a person is excited about doing spirituality, but not excited about doing it with other people. And that's a lesson, that's a hard lesson I learned. I learned that some people work really well by themselves. And some people cannot stand other human interaction. You put them with other humans and they just destroy themselves. And that spiritual team that particular year didn't really do anything because the person couldn't get along with anybody that was on her team. And she alienated, everybody on her team and pretty much handed the responsibility to somebody else. And we were able to salvage what was left that particular year on the spiritual component. But that's a hard lesson I learned. And so I'm still trying to figure out how, to place people on the right place of the bus, because excitement comes, but excitement dwindles when they actually have to do the work. Does that make sense? We started a new Sabbath school. Everyone's excited about the new Sabbath school. And we started in one of the rooms of the church, and everyone's excited about going there. And the first Sabbath, we have this new Sabbath school. There's 50 people there. We don't have 50 people in our church, but they were all there. The next Sabbath, there's 52, and we're getting really excited. By the 3rd Sabbath, there's 47. By the 4th Sabbath, there's 12. By the 6th Sabbath, there's 3. And you're like, what happened? People get excited about something and then it just dwindles down. So there's no component that I built into the strategy to deal with that. I just flow with the reality of humanity. That's what the human being would do always. They're always going to be that way, and they're always going to do that. So, but if I can find some way to involve people, then I feel good that I, as a pastor, have been able to help a church to move forward. So if I were to leave, the church knows how to work. The church knows how to organize. The church knows how to inspire. The church knows how to find its passion. The church knows how to effectively work and touch the heart of the community. The church knows how to advertise. The church learns and knows how to work with individuals that come in from the street. Because let's be honest, not everyone that comes into our church from the community are Adventists. They don't have the Adventist lingo. They don't have the Adventist culture. They don't have the Adventist mindset. And so you'll have people come into the church that are completely way off, and learning how to navigate that and learning how to deal with those individuals is very healthy for a church to experience. I remember one time I was pastoring a church and we were talking about this concept of evangelism, working with the community. And the church always tells me, every church, the last 23 years, we are a loving church. We love everyone that comes through our door. That's not true. That's not true. Because the longer you are with a church family, you'll find out that that is not true. We have our biases, we have our uncomfortabilities, we have our positions, we have our theological opinion, underpinnings, and so forth and so on. And that comes out, especially with someone that disagrees with you. The moment someone disagrees with you, that's when you start realizing how different and how unloving and unaccepting you are of an individual that's different. So this church would tell me the same thing. We love the community, we love everyone. Anyone that comes in here will embrace them. Well, God put that concept to the test one Sabbath morning. We had a lady come to the church and we didn't know she was a multi-millionaire. We had no idea. She lived in her car, and she had been living in her car for quite a long time. When we found out the story, she lived in her car in order to pretend that she was poor so that no one would come after her money. And she got used to living that way that she just kind of didn't go back to normal society. And so she came to our church for the very first time. And when I say that the body odor was strong as death does not compare to the smell that was coming from this lady. It was harsh. It was hard. And so she came into the church and she sat in a location of the sanctuary where a group of members always sat there. They have sat there since the time of Ellen G. White. Their parents sat there, their children sat there, the roach, the cockroach, the ant, everyone sat there, and no one ever dared sit in that area of the church. Well, this new member or this new person comes, they don't know the rules, and she sat right where no one was supposed to sit. And I'm sitting there watching this. I'm watching the how is the church going to respond to this? Is anyone going to say hi to her? Is everyone going to wish her a happy Sabbath? Is anyone going to invite her over to the house? What is going to be the reaction? So I'm sitting up front. I'm standing up front watching this, and I'm watching all these members sit very far away from her. Now, obviously, because the stench was really strong. I mean, I completely understand that. No one said hi to her. No one wished her a happy Sabbath. No one welcomed her. And I remember one comment that came up to me after the services. Pastor, did you see that lady there? I saw that lady. I was glad that she was there. Yeah, man, she really stunk up the entire sanctuary. The entire sanctuary smelled. And yeah, it's going to take a long time for us to get that smell out of the pew. And so, and I said, well, it might take a long time for her to get out of the pew, but she was here. And not only was she here, she stayed for the entire service. And we invited her for lunch, but you know, she didn't want to sit for lunch, and I don't know for what reason. And so she went home, and we never saw her again that particular week. And the next Sabbath comes around, here she comes again. Same stench, same strength, but a little bit lesser, because I think she realized being around human beings and human interactions, you have to kind of take a shower. And so she did the best she could, and she sat there, and still the members saying hi. This is the second Sabbath. This is not the first time. The second Sabbath, no conversation, no interaction, and nothing. She actually stayed that particular Sabbath for potluck. I got her food. You know, the members were trying to communicate with her and so on. And so after the potluck, she forgot something in her car, and she had asked me if I can go into her car and get it. If you've ever met someone that lives in their car, that's not a place you want to go to. And so her driver's door did not open. She actually entered, the passenger door did not open. She entered through the window. That's how she got in and out of her car. And so for me to get to the location of whatever item that she was wanting me to get I had to climb in through the passenger window into her passenger seat, and then, you know, find the driver's seat where I was looking for. And let me tell you, that was the worst experience in my entire life. I had never gone through that in my life. And I remember as I got out thinking, man, this is really, really tough. But I remember what I was trying to teach the church to love these people. So I grabbed that item, I brought it to her. She was very thankful. And the next third Sabbath now, she comes back a little bit less stench. And the members started to say hi to her. Members started to wish her a happy Sabbath. They're glad to see her. By the fourth Sabbath, she disappeared. Fifth Sabbath, she wasn't there. 6th, 7th, no clue where she was. So we didn't have an address for her because we had an address book, and of course she lived in her car. We knew that, so we had no way of finding her. And so since the little town where we were living was probably around, I don't know, maybe 750, maybe 1,000 people that lived in a small town, it couldn't be that difficult to find someone that you're looking for that's homeless. And so me and an elder went around, we drove around looking for someone, and we found her car. And so we found her car outside of this barn. Now, when I say a barn, I'm talking about a barn with no roof, no walls. I mean, the thing was just a skeleton. You could tell that in that particular part of the United States, it had been there, weathered for a long, long time. And so we found it parked right there by this big, huge barn that was just horrible. And there was a trailer that was right there by the barn that was filled. You could tell the windows were completely packed to the max. You can't even get to the front door. And so we went to the neighbor that was right by this property, and we asked the neighbor, "Hey, do you know that lady that sleeps in that car?" "Oh yeah, that's so and so." Her name was Elizabeth. "That's Elizabeth. You know, she lives in the park." And I'm like, "What do you mean she lives in the park?" So yeah, that's her house. So we went knocking on the door of the barn. There is no door to knock. And so we just kind of went through the barn, and we walk into the barn. Think of all the scary movies you thought about and you've ever watched in your entire life and put them all together. That was the barn. It was bad. We walked in there. There's a bat, guano all over the place. There's a bird, you know, stuff all over the place. There's dead birds, dead animals all over the place. And in the back of the barn, there was a location that had a lean-to. And so that lean-to was covered, and that's where she lived. It was covered. She had curtains around there, and she had a bed there, and she had a nightstand there, and she had a little table there for her, but it wasn't anything suitable for a human being to live in, but that's where she was living. We didn't find her that particular day. And as we began to look, we went to the nursing home because she was elderly. So we found out that she had visited the nursing home to get some food every once in a while. And that's where they told us the story that she was a multi-millionaire that was living in this condition because her family was looking for her to take her money. And she had lived so long that way that she had lost touch with humanity. And she had lost touch with living a normal life. I tell that story because I realized if we can sum up what I'm sharing with you guys, if we can sum up what I desire churches to do, I desire churches to work for people, whomever they be. Because people have different walks of life, different challenges, different difficulties, different realities. And the essence of what I realized from the years is even though people have different walks of life and different essences, they still have a mental need, an emotional need, a spiritual need, a physical need. And if I can help the church develop teams to work in those particular areas, amen, hallelujah, praise the Lord. It's exactly what I'm going to do. So this is a strategy that I wrote down in my paper at Evangelism University. No pastor has this. You know, they didn't write it down. They didn't, you know, they said, well, you know, Howard, that's really interesting. Let's see how it works out. And so I've been doing it ever since, and I realized that it has its ups and downs, it has its challenges, it has its reality, maybe because of human nature. But I also realized I have never seen so many smiles on people's faces as they work with the people in their community. That to me became work. Does that make sense?
How long did, wherever you implemented this, how long have you seen it carried out before?
I think the longest I've seen it carried out before we moved. We got back from Andrews University in 2017. We got to the Modesto and the Banjo Seventh-day Adventist churches. We started working with those two churches that conference gave us. We started to implement this reality, started to get the members involved, get them working in this particular fashion. We planted 2 other churches. So instead of having 2 churches, we now have 4. And so that's where I developed this model, because I realized that I had all these individuals that wanted to be taught to work and they didn't know how to work. So I developed this mentor model so that I can go ahead and work with those the new church plants so that they can effectively work and move forward. And so, but then we got called to come here. And so that happened in 2019, the end of 2019, by 2020, when we moved up here. So from 2017 to 2019-ish is how long we did there. And then we went to Chuila and Chuila and Deer Park, and we did it up there in Chuila and Deer Park. And what I found is this is extremely difficult to do during COVID. Everything was shut down. No one wanted to come to a mental program. No one wanted to do any of these things. So we did it online. We set up a camera. There was a member at there were several members of Chuila that had the ability for media. And so they had these cameras and they had these computers and they had these backdrops and they had these stage lights. And so we set up a studio, a recording studio in the fellowship hall of the Chuila Seventh Adventist Church. And then we started recording these things. And those recordings, we started watching the numbers of the views go from 235 to 125 to 257. And we started to see the numbers come around. And we had people that would, because we would do it live, we would have live questions and answers. And people would come and contact. They would send their questions and they would engage. People from the community that I was involved with in the Minister Association in Chuila, they would contact me personally and say, hey, when are you guys doing that next event? Because you guys already talked about the mental and you guys started to advertise about the emotional. And I really have an emotional problem and I'm going to go to your program online. When are you going to have that program? They started calling me for that reality. So I started seeing the buzz of that reality there in Chuila. Then the issues of theology happened in Chuila and everything fell apart. Because now at the forefront of that church was a theological dilemma. And so evangelism was thrown out the window. We tried to evangelize, but when you have people warring against each other and hating each other and fighting with each other theologically, very hard to go evangelize. So now here I am, Milton free water and move on. And we're going to try this and see how this works. So this is the strategy. This is the idea. By the next couple of months, or for the rest of this year, we're going to focus on what I call dream sessions, where I invite the entire church to come and dream with me what evangelism would look like if you had unlimited resources. There were absolutely no limits to the resources you could have. Unlimited funds. You have all the money in the world. What would you do? And you have no negative person. No person saying you can't do that, that can't happen in the church, whatever. You have those three components. What would you do? And I dream with the church. And I allowed them to expand their ideas and their passion. And that's where I started developing and start seeing the leaders amongst that group. And then from that dream session, we started developing teams. We started developing a strategy. So that when we hit 2024, January 2024, team number 1 is ready to go. Team number 2 picks up in the next 3 months. Team number 3, the next 3 months. Team number 4 finishes in the next 3 months. That make sense? So that's how that's going to work out. And so right now, you guys just got the injection, the idea of the strategy that I developed there at Andrews University. And so now we're going to find out if it works here in this context. Because here again, what I've realized and what I've understood is everywhere I have gone, even before 2015, people still have a mental, people still have emotion, people still have physical, people still have spiritual. For the first 15 years of my ministry, I focused on spiritual because that's what I was trying to do. And so I realized that if you help someone with their spirituality, then everything is fine. We baptize individuals, but they're still struggling with smoking, or they're still struggling with whatever, or they're still struggling with anger issues and stress, and they don't know how to deal with that stuff. And so no matter how many times they pray, no matter how many scriptures they read, no matter how many Bible studies they give, they can't take care of the emotional because I haven't given them the tools. Or the mental. They have no idea how to get over pornography. They have no idea how to deal with the intrusive thoughts that come in when you don't even want them to come. I didn't teach them how to do that. I would just tell them, hey, you just got to pray more. You just got to read more Bible. You got to memorize scripture. So they would memorize scripture. They would read more of their Bible, but they were still lacking the ability to effectively deal and develop their mental health because I didn't know what to do. So that's when I developed this concept and reality and started to focus on these areas and help the churches to help these areas of their community. Does that make sense? It's not anything new. It's just a different,
Different slant.
yeah, it's just a different stamp. It's just a different presentation. It's still text. It's just using a different model. And so, but it's figuring out a way, and my idea has always been, my passion has always been, how can I get people that would never be involved in something? Because a lot of the things I've also learned before we develop these teams, there's a lot of red tape. You know, people want to do something, but they have to bring it to the board. They have to bring it to this committee, and the committee has to approve it, and the board has to approve it. And by the time the board approves and the committee has to approve it, they've lost their interest of doing that thing they wanted to do. And so how can we move that aside? We empower these teams in the very beginning. We notify the board, this is exactly what's going to happen. We make sure that there's funds available for them to do that. We propose, we make a plan, a proposal for the conference to make sure that those funds come from the conference to help out on the project, and then we move forward. Make sense?
Anything new is worth a try.
Yeah, at least once.
Yeah, and as I think back over all the years that I've been involved, sometimes it's just a matter of a good organizational component.
Yeah.
To provide that structure.
Yeah.
Or, in the case of, like I said, the stuff I've done in the past, sometimes you just, if the board is happy to see whoever initiate whatever, that's not a barrier necessarily, but yeah, you can't keep doing it forever.
No.
Take a breather, come back to it.
Yeah. Yeah, there was, I will tell you, there's one last story. There was a young man that really took this to heart. And in January of that year in Modesto, that's what Spanish church, he noticed that there was a big issue with mental health with the homeless. And so what he wanted to do is a homeless, feeding. He wanted to feed them every Sunday. And I told him, listen, when something you start like this heavy, you don't want to do every single week because you're going to burn yourself out. No, Pastor, we got to do this because it's a need. Yeah, I understand it's a need, but you have to develop yourself for that need for the long run. So if you're trying to run a marathon and you sprint from the get-go, you're going to burn out before your first mile, before your first 2 miles or 3 miles. So you have to pace yourself knowing that it's a marathon, not a race. And so I shared with him those concepts because he was one of the ones I was mentoring and developing to be a leader for one of the church plants that we were developing. And so, but he's like, no, I'm gonna do it anyways. Me and my family are gonna do it, and we have a couple of members, and the members were excited because here again, members are always excited with something that is new until you actually have to do it. That's when the rubber met the proverbial road. That's where members got frustrated because, I gotta spend 3 hours or 4 hours there Sunday morning with these individuals and cook this food and then clean up this food and take this food and all this stuff. And then pretty soon, eventually, after just a couple of months, it was just him and his family. And I would share with him, listen, just cut it back. Do it once every 3 months. No, once every 3 months is too little. Trust me. You're not going to last for the long run if you keep doing it by yourself with just your family. And sure enough, he couldn't keep it up because what ended up happening is all the people that we brought from that homeless ministry were scoping out our church. And they broke into our church and tried to steal our sound system and they defecated on the pew. They did a bunch of bad stuff that they shouldn't have done. And so eventually that young man gave up on the idea. But it shouldn't have gotten there because he really sprinted instead of paced himself and made it for the long run. Involve people to be able to do this thing. Because here again, members want to do something, but I'm realizing that they're burning out faster than you can say amen forward, backwards, and in Chinese. So my job as a pastor is to figure out how to get them involved, but get them involved for the long run. That's my responsibility. All right, let me pray with you guys. Father, we thank you so much for the opportunity that you've granted us to be here for evangelism class. We pray that you will guide us, that you will bless us as we develop this concept, this idea, this strategy for the remainder of this year. We prepare ourselves for 2024. We pray that you will help us to be able to impact significantly the community of Milton Freewater and Blue Mountain Valley area. We pray and ask these things in the name of Jesus Christ.